On a crisp autumn morning, Emily Harper knelt on her front lawn, tying her shoelace, unaware that two patrol officers were closing in, hands hovering over their holsters. "Ma'am, step away and keep your hands visible." One barked, his voice taut with suspicion. Emily, dressed in worn joggers and a hoodie, her legally holstered sidearm snug against her hip, glanced up, half mused, half bewildered. The officer's eyes locked on her as if she were seconds from pulling a heist. One fumbled with his radio, muttering, "Suspect is armed female. Possible threat. Neighborhood complaint." Then his gaze caught the badge clipped to Emily's waistband, glinting in the morning sun. The air shifted. The second officer's face drained of color. "Chief Harper? You're Chief Emily Harper?" he stammered, stepping back as if he'd just seen a spectre. Across the street, Margaret Voss, the HOA president, stood clutching her yapping terrier and her phone, whispering into it with a smug grin, oblivious to the storm she just unleashed. She didn't know the gun-wielding maniac she'd accused was the new police chief, and her false 911 call was a felony that would unravel her carefully crafted empire. This wasn't a random clash. For months, Margaret had been waging a silent war to bend the quiet suburban street into her personal thief. Elected HOA president for the third time through a suspiciously sparse voter turnout and a well-timed potluck, she ruled with an iron fist, doing out fines like a medieval tax collector, $25 for overgrown grass, $50 for kids' chalk drawings, $100 for lingering Christmas lights. Her latest obsession was a self-imposed ban on visible firearms, claiming they unsettled the neighborhood despite the state's open carry laws and Emily's presence calming fears after last year's burglaries. To Margaret, Emily's holster wasn't protection, it was defiance. 2 days earlier, Margaret had stormed into Emily's yard uninvited as Emily oiled her pruning shears. "You'll be fined $500 a day for that weapon in public view," she snapped. Emily, unruffled, explained she was off duty within her rights and that the HOA had no legal authority over personal firearms. Margaret sneered, "I expected better from someone in your position. You're supposed to set an example, not look like you're itching for a shootout." Emily's calm smile didn't waver. "I am setting an example, Margaret, one that follows the law, not your whims." Margaret stormed off, vowing, "I'll handle this." And she did. Or so she thought by dialing 911 when Emily stepped outside that fateful morning. The officers, shaken upon recognizing Emily, apologized mid-sentence. "Chief Dispatch just said armed woman," and the HOA president insisted it was urgent. One mumbled. Emily nodded. "You did your job. Now I'll do mine." Margaret, still smirking across the street, watched her dramatic bust implode. Emily approached, her voice steady but steel-edged. "Margaret, you filed a false police report claiming an armed threat. That's a crime." Margaret blinked. Her voice is squeak. "I didn't know it was you. You weren't in uniform. You could have been anyone." Emily's gaze didn't flinch. "That's why you don't call in threats without proof. You endangered neighbors, officers, and yourself. You'll answer for this." That evening, 6 neighbors showed up at Emily's door with brownies, a pie, and soda, saying, "We saw it all. She's unhinged. How can we help?" Their support was a quiet rebellion against Margaret's reign, and Emily, who shunned the spotlight, despite her promotion, felt the neighborhood's trust solidify. She wasn't just a cop, she was their shield. But Margaret wasn't done. The next day, she circulated a newsletter accusing Emily of brandishing a weapon and making her feel unsafe. She called Emily's presence divisive, hinting at abuse of power. Emily didn't take the bait publicly. Instead, she sent the 911 transcript, her body cam footage, and a harassment complaint to the city attorney. The city council, stunned by the evidence, held a closed-door meeting where Emily laid bare Margaret's campaign, anonymous letters warning neighbors to shun troublemakers, all traced to home mailers, and a rule book of her own invention. One councillor gasped, "I thought the HOA was about landscaping, not a dictatorship." Margaret, oblivious to the news tightening, pushed for a weapons ban at an emergency HOA meeting, citing her 911 call as proof. But the room turned on her. A soft-spoken retiree, Tom, stood up. "You lied about our police chief endangered us all, and you're lucky we're not voting you out tonight." Margaret's vice president whispered something and her face froze. She was losing control. Undeterred, Margaret dug deeper, calling a local reporter to smear Emily. Unaware the reporter's son owed his life to Emily's heroism in a fire years ago. The call backfired. Meanwhile, Emily stayed composed, her calm a weapon sharper than Margaret's hysteria. At a public safety meeting, Emily presented the 911 call, newsletter screenshots, and her rights as a citizen and officer. The room fell silent as Margaret's panicked voice played, labeling Emily a dangerous threat. The mayor, incredulous, ordered a citywide HOA review. The city attorney probed Margaret's enforcement policies, and the HOA's vice president, David Chin, confessed to Emily that Margaret had sidelined the board for years, issuing fines without votes. He submitted a statement exposing her as a one-woman tyrant. Margaret's next move was a glossy newsletter, restoring safety, painting herself as a victim of Emily, a woman tied to law enforcement. It landed in every mailbox, even taped to doors. But a furious neighbor forwarded it to the mayor, writing, "Is this what our dues fund?" The backlash grew. At an HOA meeting, residents like Mrs. Larson, a 35-year veteran of the block, praised Emily's service helping her grandson, stopping a drunk driver. Another waved the newsletter, shouting, "You lied to the police and slandered her. That's not safety, that's reckless." Margaret accused them of mutiny, but when the board mentioned a no-confidence vote, she laughed nervously. The vote was brutal. 28 to remove her, 2 to keep her, 1 abstention. She stormed out, fuming. The city's legal team uncovered $75,000 in missing HOA funds tied to a phantom security firm Margaret had hired. Her defamation lawsuit against Emily crumbled when chat logs surfaced, showing her mocking Emily and plotting to remove her. The judge, skeptical, warned Margaret about false claims. Her lawyer, a sweaty billboard regular, begged for a recess. The suit was dismissed. Margaret unraveled publicly, ranting at a barbecue with a megaphone about police corruption and drones spying on her. A marshal escorted her out as kids cried and parents gawked. She became a neighborhood punchline. Her meltdowns captioned online as Margaret's greatest hits. Emily, cautious, documented everything: vague threats from unknown emails, one signed by Margaret's ex, a former HOA treasurer. A restraining order followed. Emily used the chaos to train officers on false reporting and HOA abuse. Speaking at town halls about accountability, her story spread, a case study in dismantling corruption. With patience and proof, Margaret's house went up for sale, then bank-owned. Her loans defaulted after leveraging HOA funds. A search of her storage unit revealed a chilling hoard: HOA property, surveillance drones, and a spreadsheet of priority control targets, including kids labeled emerging threats for skateboarding. The charges piled up: fraud, illegal surveillance, misuse of funds, triggering a federal HOA probe. In a final gasp, Margaret gave a podcast interview claiming to be a whistleblower against Emily's deep state plot. The unedited footage leaked by a former student of Emily's showed her admitting to falsifying complaints. She faced jail time, taking a plea deal to testify about other hoes she'd poisoned. Her civic career was banned, her assets sold, including a damaged drone with a note for Chief Harper. With regret, Emily donated it to a tech drive. Unmoved, the neighborhood healed. Sidewalks bloomed with chalk art. Parks hosted egg hunts and the hoe's old office became a resource library. Emily declined to cut its ribbon. Attending as a neighbor, a teen once fined for skating gave her a card. "Thanks for proving one person can make a difference." A state bill nicknamed for Emily mandated HOA transparency. At a block party marking the incident's anniversary, neighbors danced to an old rock ballad, kids ran barefoot, and Emily stood quietly, the storm she'd weathered now a distant echo. She didn't seek glory, but her resolve had rebuilt the community. As she said, watching the stars that night, the best part wasn't her losing. It was us winning each other.